Welcome, everyone, to the deep dive. Have you ever found yourself trying to grasp a really complex topic, maybe for work, a crucial meeting, or maybe just because you're, really curious, and you just feel completely bombarded like there's this avalanche of information coming at you?
Oh, definitely. It's like trying to drink from a fire hose, isn't it?
Exactly. You're just drowning in details, trying to figure out what actually matters, what the signal is versus all the noise. And you just wish there was like a shortcut, a way to cut through it all and get straight to the core ideas to really get it.
A clear path through the thicket.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what we try to do here at the Deep Dive. We take your source material, your articles, research, maybe even your own notes, and we dig deep. We unearth the most important nuggets of knowledge, the key insights, to give you that shortcut to being genuinely well-informed. And today, wow, we are diving headfirst into a really formidable text. It's one that fundamentally challenges how we think about reality itself. We're looking at excerpts from Edmund Husserl's groundbreaking work, Ideas Pertaining to a Pure Phenomenology and to a Phenomenological Philosophy, first book. Bit of a mouthful, but foundational stuff.
Absolutely foundational. Game-changing, really.
So our mission today isn't about getting bogged down in, publication dates or who influenced who. That's not the focus.
Yeah.
Instead, we're going straight to the heart of it, exploring the really profound themes, the core ideas, the philosophy that Husserl lays out. We want to offer you a thoughtful, reflective, and hopefully crystal clear understanding of what it means to truly see and understand reality.
It's a shift in perspective he's asking for.
Totally. So just setting expectations here. This isn't exactly a casual stroll. It's a deep dive into the very structure of how we experience things. We're going to challenge some pretty fundamental assumptions about how we perceive the world, and introduce a radically different way of thinking about knowledge and being. And to guide us through these, let's say, intricate philosophical waters, to connect the dots and really illuminate the deeper implications, we have our resident expert.
Well, what's truly revolutionary here, I think, is that Husserl is essentially inviting us, and you, the listener, to rethink how we approach knowledge itself, from its very foundations. He wants us to move beyond what he calls the natural attitude. That's kind of the unexamined, everyday way we live our lives, the way we even do traditional science sometimes. And his goal is to uncover a more fundamental, often hidden layer of our experience. He's not just asking what we know, but he's really digging into how we know it and what that how truly means for our understanding of reality.
So it's not just content, but the process of knowing.
Exactly, the very structure of knowing. So for our journey today, we'll focus on a few core pillars of his thought. We'll build our understanding step by step. First, we'll explore how Husserl distinguishes between our common, everyday, natural cognition, just how we normally think, and a deeper, more fundamental way of understanding he calls eidetic seeing. Bit of jargon there, but we'll unpack it.
Eidetic seeing, okay.
Then we'll dive into his really revolutionary method, the phenomenological reduction, also known as the Epoche. It's his unique way of trying to access what he terms pure consciousness.
The Epoche. I heard that term before. Sounds crucial.
It is. And from that base, we'll look at the fundamental structure of intentionality. It's the idea that consciousness isn't just a passive bucket, It's always consciousness of something, always directed.
Active, not passive. Got it.
Right. Then after that, we'll unpack this intricate, kind of two-sided relationship between the subjective experience, the act of experiencing, which he calls noesis, and the objective meaning, or noema, of what is experienced.
Noesis and noema. Okay, more terms to explore. The how and the what, maybe?
Sort of, yeah. The subjective act and the objective sense. We'll get into it. And finally, we'll connect all these threads, these profound insights, to see how they culminate in a comprehensive phenomenology of reason. And this radically redefines what we even mean by actuality and truth.
Wow. That's a huge scope.
It really is. And it raises a really important question for you listening. What if our most basic, taken for granted assumptions about the world, the ones guiding our everyday lives, are actually blinding us? What if they're stopping us from seeing something even more fundamental about reality and our place in it?
Like wearing glasses we don't know we have on.
Precisely. What if there's a profoundly different way to be truly well-informed? Not just knowing more facts and figures, but understanding the very essence, the very constitution of those facts, how they come to be facts for us.
Setting the stage beyond natural thinking.
Okay, let's unpack this. We should probably start where Husserl does, right? With what he calls our everyday natural cognition.
Exactly.
The starting point.
This is basically how most of us operate pretty much automatically all the time. It's the way we encounter the world. And he says it starts and stays entirely within he terms experience.
That's the key. Within experience.
Right. And in this natural attitude, the world is just, well, it's the sum total of objects of possible experience and experiential cognition. It's the world of physical stuff, trees, rocks, gravity.
Material nature, yeah.
And also animate beings, like us, animals. And then this term he uses, Geisteswissenschaften.
Right. The spirit sciences or human sciences is probably a better translation for us.
Yeah, things like history, culture, sociology, economics. So in this natural attitude, you just know your desk is there, right?
Yeah.
Or you assume your friend is happy based on how they act, or you treat the stock market like a real thing influencing your life.
You take it all as given, unquestionably real, existing out there, independent of you.
Exactly. It's just common sense, the unreflective way we live.
Yeah.
The world is just there. But, and this is the big question he raises, is that all there is to reality.
What if this natural attitude, the seemingly obvious way of seeing things, is actually diverting our gaze, like hiding something deeper, something more fundamental about reality and our experience of it?
And that's precisely his point. He argues there is something much more, something our everyday assumptions tend to obscure. And that's where he introduces this crucial distinction.
Which is?
It's the distinction between merely seeing matters of fact, these individual, specific, contingent things in the world, and grasping essences, or eidos. This is really foundational for him.
Essences, eidos. Okay, what does that mean practically?
Well, think of it like this. When you see a specific red object, say this particular red apple on the table, you're experiencing a matter of fact. It's unique, it's here, and now it could have been green or not here at all, contingent.
Right, just this one apple.
But Husserl says, through a different kind of mental act, what he calls eidetic seeing or ideation, you can grasp the pure essence of redness itself, independent of any particular red thing.
So not the apple's red, but just redness.
Exactly. The universal quality that all red things share. And crucially, this isn't an empirical observation you make with your eyes. It's an eidetic possibility you grasp through a different kind of insight. It's like an aha moment where you understand the whatness of red separate from any instance.
Okay, so it's a kind of intellectual seeing, not just sensory.
Precisely. And this seeing, which is presentative of the essence, as he calls it, can sometimes be adequate, meaning you grasp it fully, perfectly clearly. He gives the example of the essence of a tone. You can kind of perfectly understand what a musical tone is, its essential nature, without hearing every single possible tone.
You grasp the concept fully.
Right. But it can also be inadequate, especially with essences related to physical things. These, he says, can only be given one-sidedly. We grasp their essence like spatiality or physical thingness, but always through different perspectives, never exhaustively all at once. There's always more implied.
Like seeing only one side of a box. You grasp boxness, but not all sides simultaneously.
Exactly. And what's really fascinating and maybe counterintuitive is that he says we can achieve this eidetic seeing even through free fantasy, through imagination.
Really? How does that work?
You don't need a real red object in front of you to grasp the essence of redness. You can just imagine any spatial shape, any melody, any social interaction. It doesn't matter if it's ever been given an actual experience or not. The essence can still be grasped in its purity because it's not tied to whether something actually exists in the world. It's about the ideal possibility.
So the essence isn't just a generalization from experience. It can be grasped independently.
That's the radical claim, yes. It's an insight into ideal structures, not just an abstraction from facts.
Okay, so if I grasp the essence of redness, how does that relate back to the individual red apple, this here, as you called it? Is the apple just a bundle of these essences?
Good question. It's not just a bundle. An individual this here, like our apple, it has essences. It participates in them. But it also has what he calls a materially filled essential composition, characterized by a substrate essence that is formless.
Whoa, okay, substrate essence.
Yeah, it's a big dense. Think of it like this. The individual apple instantiates or embodies many essences, redness, fruitness, roundness, etc. The substrate essence is like the underlying thisness, the raw potential or individuality that allows these specific essences to come together in this particular concrete instance. It's what makes it this apple, not just an apple.
The unique haecidi, maybe?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
The principle of individuation, perhaps. Now, building on this, Husserl develops another really important distinction between formal ontologies and material ontologies.
Ontology,
Yeah.
studies of being, right? So formal and material ways of studying being.
Exactly. Formal ontology for Husserl is basically pure logic in its full extent as mathesis universalis, universal mathematics, or maybe universal grammar of thought. Its theme is any object whatever, anything that can be thought or experienced coherently. It establishes the eidetic science of any object whatever and contains the forms of all ontologies. It kind of prescribes the basic rules, the formal structure that any specific ontology must follow.
So it's like the operating system for reality, or for how we can think about reality, the absolute basic rules.
That's a great analogy. It outlines the fundamental axioms and categories that apply to anything that can be an object for us, regardless of what it is. It dictates the very possibility of objecthood. It's not just saying logic is useful. It's suggesting logic reveals the fundamental structure of any possible object.
That's a very strong claim for logic.
It is. It elevates logic to an insight into the very fabric of possible being. Now, contrast that with material ontologies. These deal with specific regional essences.
Like different domains.
Precisely. So you have the ontology of nature, which is the eidetic science of any physical nature, whatever. It deals with essences specific to the physical world, like causality, substance, space, time, as they apply there. Geometry is another example, a pure eidetics of the essence of space.
So different sciences or areas have their own underlying essential structures.
Yeah, exactly. And these material ontologies involve synthetical truths, truths that combine concepts, not just definitions grounded in that specific regional essence. They define the unique regional categories for that domain. The categories for physics, mass, energy are different from those for biology, life organism, or mathematics, number, set.
Okay, that makes sense. Different fields, different core concepts or essences. Now, you mentioned geometry helping physics. How does that connection work more broadly between these abstract essences and the factual sciences?
The interconnection is absolutely crucial. Husserl argues that any science of matters of fact, any experiential science, has essential theoretical foundations in eidetic ontologies.
So the factual depends on the essential.
In a way, yes. He points out, as you mentioned, that physics had its great era, when geometry, a pure eidetics of space, was made fruitful in the grand style for the method of physics. Why? Because by grasping the a priori essential structure of space, physicists could formulate universal laws, like Newton's, that weren't just descriptions of this falling object, but applied essentially to all motion in space.
It gave them the underlying framework.
Exactly. The more an empirical science understands and utilizes the underlying eidetic structures of its domain, the more rigorous, predictive, and powerful it becomes. It shows that our factual knowledge isn't floating free. It's implicitly grounded in a deeper, essential understanding of the structures of whatever we're studying. It's like knowing the rules of chess. Deeply allows you to play much better than just observing moves.
That's a really powerful idea about the foundations of science. Now, Husserl seems very aware that talking about essences can be easily misunderstood, right? He tackles this reproach of Platonic realism. People hear essences and think of Plato's forms, these abstract things existing somewhere else entirely.
Yes, he's very keen to head off that interpretation. When he talks about essences as objects with actual veritable being, he's not saying they are just psychical products, things in our heads, nor are they mere concept formations. But he's also not saying they exist like tables and chairs, or in some Platonic heaven.
So what is he saying? It sounds like a fine line to walk.
It is. He uses numbers as an example to force clarity. He poses this kind of dilemma. If concepts are psychical formations, just thoughts in my head, then those affairs, such as pure numbers, are not concepts because numbers seem objective. But if they are concepts, then concepts are not psychical formations. They must be something more.
So he's using logic to show the inadequacy of just calling them concepts or thoughts.
Exactly. He's demanding we use precise, unambiguous terms. The essence of two-ness isn't just my fleeting thought of two. It's an objective, ideal structure I can grasp, whether I'm thinking of two apples or two variables. It's not my product, though I grasped it. It's objective, but ideal, not physically real. And he makes a further really helpful distinction between the act of thinking or imagining and the object of that act. He talks about concept formation and free fiction, imagining, as spontaneous activities of the mind. These acts are indeed subjective psychical events.
Okay, the doing is subjective.
Right. But the object these acts aim at is different. He uses the brilliant example of a flute-playing centaur we freely imagine. The act of imagining is a real psychical event happening in your consciousness. But, he says, obviously the centaur itself is nothing psychical. It exists neither in the soul nor in consciousness, nor does it exist somewhere else. The centaur is indeed nothing. It is wholly imagination.
So the imagined centaur isn't in my head, even though the imagining is.
Exactly. The centaur is the intended object, the what's of the imaginative act. It's not a mental thing itself. Think of an architect's blueprint. The blueprint is a physical thing, a product of activity. But the building represented isn't in the paper, it's what the blueprint intends. Confusing the act with the object leads to huge philosophical problems, either subjectivizing everything or creating weird mystical entities.
That blueprint analogy really clarifies it. The plan versus the intended building.
Okay. Husserl wants a rigorous way to talk about objective structures, like essences or even the intended centaur, that we grasp through subjective acts, without reducing the object to the act or making the object into a weird kind of thing.
So we've established this fundamental difference between seeing individual facts, natural attitude, and grasping pure objective essences, eidetic seeing. And we know the natural attitude kind of locks us into the first mode. The massive question then becomes, how do we actually get to these essences? How do we access these deeper structures when our default natural attitude is so ingrained, always assuming the world just is? How do we shift gears?
The radical shift phenomenological reduction, Epoche.
Right, and this leads us straight into what feels like the methodological core, the big leap in Husserl's phenomenology. We're constantly living in this natural attitude, aren't we? Just automatically conscious of the world as factually existing actuality. It's not even a conscious choice most of the time. It's a general positing of existence, just taken for granted.
Completely presuppose the background assumption for everything else.
But Husserl says, okay, we need to alter it radically. And this radical alteration, this method, he calls the Epoche, or the phenomenological reduction.
The Epoche, yes. It's the gateway, in a sense.
Now, when I hear about radically altering our view, putting things out of action, parenthesizing the world, my mind immediately jumps to Descartes, his universal doubt, questioning everything to find certainty. Is the Epoche basically Husserl's version of Cartesian doubt? Is he telling us to doubt the world's existence?
That's a really common connection people make, and it's understandable because there's a parallel in the methodical spirit. But it's absolutely critical to see the difference. Husserl's Epoche is fundamentally not Cartesian doubt.
Okay, how so?
Descartes doubted in order to find something indubitable about existence. He wanted to prove things exist. Husserl's Epoche is not about negating existence or falling into skepticism. He's very explicit. The annulment in question is not a transmutation of positing into counterpositing, of position into negation. It is also not a transmutation into uncertain presumption.
So it's not saying the world doesn't exist, or even maybe it doesn't exist.
Not at all. He's not making an ontological claim against the world. Instead, the Epoche is about putting out of action the general positing which belongs to the essence of the natural attitude. We parenthesize everything which that positing encompasses with respect to being. That means the whole natural world, which is constantly there for us, on hand, we suspend our belief in its factual independent existence.
Suspend belief, like hitting pause on that assumption.
Exactly like hitting pause. We put the world in quotation marks, metaphorically speaking. We don't deny it. We just refrain from endorsing its existence for the moment. Why? Not because it might not be real, but specifically to shift our focus. We stop looking through the belief in its existence and start looking at the belief and at the experience itself, how that world appears to us.
Okay, so the goal isn't denial, it's examination, shifting focus.
Precisely. The purpose of this restriction, this bracketing, isn't to end up with nothing, but to discover a new scientific domain, a whole new field of study.
And that domain is?
That domain is what he calls pure mental processes, pure consciousness, with its pure correlates of consciousness, the objects as meant, and its pure ego, the center of awareness. This whole field is the phenomenological residuum, what's left after the bracketing. And this residuum, he says, is a region of being, which is essentially quite unique, and crucially, it's untouched by the Epoche itself.
So bracketing the world reveals consciousness itself as a field of study.
Yes, an absolute field. He describes it as essentially coherent in itself, an openly endless and yet self-contained sphere of being with its own forms, those of an immanental temporality. We're left with the pure flow and structure of conscious experience before we make assumptions about an external cause or reality. It's not an empty void, but consciousness with its structures. And this is also where he makes another vital distinction between transcendental reductions, what he's doing, and mere psychological reductions.
That's the difference there.
Well, traditional empirical psychology studies consciousness too, right?
Right.
But it studies it as a psychological fact, a real event happening in the world, within an animate being. It operates within the natural attitude.
Okay, psychology assumes the natural world.
Yes. Husserl's transcendental reduction aims higher, or deeper perhaps. It wants to study consciousness not as a worldly event, but as an absolute sphere of being, independent of the empirical world prior to all those naturalistic assumptions. Its critique of positivism, which often limits knowledge to empirical facts. Husserl says the Epoche excludes all prejudices, aiming for a science free of theories, free of metaphysics, grounded purely in the immediate findings of experience itself, carefully distinguishing different kinds of intuition, empirical versus eidetic, which he thinks positivists often confuse.
So it's aiming for a more fundamental science of experience before we even get to sciences about the world experienced. Okay. So what exactly gets put out of action or bracketed when we do this Epoche? What's left outside the brackets and what's inside?
Right. So first and foremost, the entire natural world, physical things, animate beings, humans, considered as factually existing actualities, gets put out of action from our field of judgment. Again, not denied, but our belief in its actuality is suspended.
The world out there. Okay.
And logically, if you bracket the world, you also bracket all the empirical sciences that presuppose that world physics, biology, empirical psychology, sociology, they all rely on the natural attitude. So they're temporarily set aside from the phenomenological inquiry.
Makes sense. What else does it go deeper?
Oh, yes. It gets more subtle. You might think, okay, what about formal logic or mathesis universalis? These seem abstract, universal, maybe they survive the epoche.
Yeah, they don't seem part of the natural world in the same way.
But Husserl says if phenomenology is purely descriptive analysis in pure intuition, looking directly at how things appear in consciousness, then even the deductive systems of logic and math, treated as formal theories, are also parenthesized.
Why? That seems surprising.
Because the focus shifts. Instead of just using logic, phenomenology wants to investigate how logical structures themselves are constituted in consciousness. How do we experience logical necessity? So the formal systems are bracketed to study their phenomenal basis. Similarly, transcendent essences tied to objects in the natural world, like the specific essence of this oak tree, are also excluded when the focus is purely on immanental consciousness formations, the structures within consciousness itself. Wow. So it's a really thorough clearing of the decks layer by layer, extremely thorough. And he emphasizes that this systematic doctrine of all the phenomenological reductions isn't just a one-off trick. It serves as a methodic function of continually reminding us that these other spheres, the natural world, science, logic as external systems, lie outside the specific field of transcendental phenomenology. It's a constant vigilance against smuggling unexamined assumptions back in, which would lead to countersensical confusion. Maintaining the purity of the focus is key.
It's a demanding method then, a constant discipline. Okay, so we perform this epoche. We bracket the world, the sciences, even formal logic in a sense, and we're left with pure consciousness. But a listener might still wonder, okay, what is this pure consciousness? If we set aside the world, what's left? Is it just my own isolated mind? How does this pure consciousness relate back to the objects we normally think of as being out there, the ones we've just put in brackets? How do we avoid solipsism?
The core of experience, intentionality, and its structures.
Right, because if we've bracketed the world, we need to understand what remains. And this, as you said, is where it gets really interesting. We're shifting from the method, epoche, to the nature of what's revealed, pure consciousness. So if this is the feel, what are its universal structures? What defines it? And you mentioned Husserl's key concept here, intentionality.
Intentionality.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Arguably his most central discovery, or rediscovery and reframing, perhaps.
We mentioned Descartes' cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. But you said Husserl uses cogito or consciousness much more broadly than just thinking. What does it encompass for him, and how does intentionality fit in?
Great question. Intentionality is, for Husserl, the fundamental defining characteristic of consciousness. It's the property of consciousness to be consciousness of something.
Always of something.
Always. It's never just empty awareness like a blank screen. It's always directed, aimed, pointed towards an object. This is the core of his expanded cogito.
Yeah.
Every conscious act, perceiving, judging, valuing, wishing, remembering, imagining, is an act about something, towards something. So he says, a perceiving is the perceiving of something, perhaps a physical thing. A judging is a judging of a predicatively formed affair complex. Valuing of a predicatively formed value complex. A wishing of a predicatively formed wish complex, and so forth. Consciousness inherently has this directiveness, this aboutness. It comes with a built-in pointer.
So it's fundamentally relational.
Fundamentally relational. And within every actional cogito, meaning an act we're actively engaged in, there's what he describes as a radiating regard, directed from the pure ego to the object. This ego regard isn't static. It changes with the type of act. In perception, it's a perceptual regard to, a direct looking. In fantasy, an inventive regard to. In liking, a liking regard to. In willing, a willing regard to. It shows consciousness is active, dynamic, multifaceted in its engagement with its objects.
It's not just a passive gaze.
Not at all. But importantly, consciousness isn't always like a focused spotlight. Husserl notes there are noteworthy modifications, where consciousness shifts between actional avertance, active focus, and non-actionality.
Okay, actional versus non-actional, like foreground and background.
Exactly. An active, explicit perception, maybe you're really focusing on reading the sentence, can fade into the background, becomes implicit, non-actional, but it's still there, still part of your conscious field. For example, he says, the objective background, from out of which the cognitively perceived object stands out, and which is also conscious, is not intended to actionally as an object. While you focus on my voice, you're likely implicitly aware of the room, the chair you're sitting on, ambient sounds. They're conscious, but not in focus, until maybe I mention the chair and then it pops into actual focus for a moment.
That makes total sense. Like, driving a familiar route a lot is non-actional until something unexpected happens.
Perfect example.
Yeah.
That interplay is constant. Now, this leads us to a really pivotal distinction within intentionality itself, the difference between immanent and transcendent perception. He avoids internal and external perception because of philosophical baggage.
Immanent and transcendent. Okay.
Immanent perception is perception of something immanent to consciousness itself, something really inherent within this stream of experience, like reflecting on a feeling you're having right now, or a thought passing through your mind. When you do that, Husserl says, I have seized upon something absolute itself, the factual being of which is essentially incapable of being negated.
Meaning the experience itself is undeniable.
Yes, the having of the experience, the feeling, the thought, is indubitable. It's absolutely given as experience. You can't doubt that you're having the thought, even if you doubt the thought's content. Transcendent perception, on the other hand, is perception of something transcendent, something experienced as being outside or independent of the conscious act itself. A physical thing is the classic example. It's transcendent to the whole world of appearance. A physical thing, he says, can exist without being perceived, without even being potentially intended to.
So the tree outside my window is transcendent. My feeling about the tree is immanent.
Precisely. And here's a crucial insight about transcendent perception. A physical thing is necessarily given only one-sidedly. It's not just given incompletely, but specifically through what he calls adumbrations or profiles.
Adumbrations, like shadows or sketches?
Kind of. Like perspectives. You only ever see one side of the house, one profile of the apple at a time. It's always given with a horizon of co-givenness, the implied presence of the unseen sides, the back, the inside, and vague indeterminateness aspects not yet clearly perceived, but potentially perceivable.
So we never get the whole physical object at once in perception.
Never exhaustively. There's always an et cetera, and this et cetera, Husserl insists, isn't a flaw in our perception. It's an evident and absolutely indispensable moment in the physical thing, noema, the intended object. It signifies the infinite openness of further possible perceptions. No God can alter that, he says. It's an essential truth about perceiving transcendent things. We know there's always more to see.
That's a really profound point about the inherent structure of perceiving the physical world. It challenges that naive idea that we just sort of passively receive a complete picture. But if perception is always one-sided, always incomplete with this, etc., does that undermine our claim to objective knowledge? How do we get stable objects if we only ever see profiles?
Excellent question. Because it seems like it could lead to skepticism, right? If I only see sides, how do I know it's a unified thing? But Husserl directly tackles theories that say what we perceive is just a picture or a sign of some true hidden physical thing. He calls those theories incorrect but countersensical.
Why countersensical?
Because, he argues, the physical thing, despite its transcendence, is something perceived, given in person in the manner peculiar to consciousness. We're not seeing a picture instead of the thing. We're seeing the thing itself, but through its appearances, its adumbrations. The transcendence means it's not identical to any single appearance, but it is present in and through them.
So the appearance isn't a barrier, it's the mode of access.
Exactly. And he connects this to science, too. The physical thing, as described by physics, isn't some alien entity separate from what appears to our senses. No, it's something which makes itself known originaliter, originally in it, the sensuous appearance, and, more particularly, a priori, only in it. Physics builds its theories from and refers back to the world constituted in our lived experience, even if it uses abstract methods. Objective knowledge comes from the consistent, intersubjectively verifiable constitution of the object through these unfolding one-sided appearances.
Okay, so objectivity is built up through consistent experience, not by somehow getting behind the appearances.
Precisely. Now, he doesn't stop at physical objects. He extends this to animated realities, humans and beasts. The world isn't just physical, it's psychophysical.
Right. How do we perceive other minds, other subjects?
Through what he calls empathic experience. We don't directly see someone else's consciousness like we see a rock. Instead, we perceive their body, their gestures, their expressions, their words, which are physical sensory phenomena. And through this, we present or constitute them as another ego subject, another center of consciousness analogous to our own.
So it's a kind of indirect constitution based on analogy.
It's a complex process involving pairing and analogy, yes. And crucially, he says, my empathizing, my consciousness of whatever sort, is originarily and absolutely given, not only with respect to its essence, but also with respect to its existence. My act of empathizing, my experience of the other, is an indubitable part of my own conscious life, even if the other's consciousness remains transcendent to mine.
That's subtle. My empathy is immanent, even if the other's mind is transcendent. But this idea of constitution seems key. How does he develop that, especially regarding the link between mind and body, or psychical and physical?
Right, constitution is central. He notes that psychical realities are founded in physical realities. My mental life is embodied, but it's not reducible to the physical. He says, all empirical unities, and therefore also psychological mental processes as studied by psychology, are indices pointing to concatenations of absolute mental processes as studied by phenomenology. There's a layered structure. Empirical psychology studies phenomena grounded in more fundamental, absolute structures phenomenology uncovers. And intersubjectivity, through empathy, builds up a shared objective world, as multiple subjects mutually constitute each other and their environment.
Okay, so consciousness is always directed. Intentionality. It distinguishes between immanent and transcendent objects, and it constitutes these objects through various complex processes like perception and empathy. And you mentioned earlier this directedness has two sides, the subjective act and the objective meaning.
Exactly. And Husserl gives these two sides very specific technical names, which are absolutely crucial for getting deeper into his analysis of how experience is structured. Understanding this pair is key.
Deconstructing experience, noesis, and noema.
Okay, so building on intentionality consciousness, always being of something Husserl, introduces these two sides of every intentional mental process, the dynamic duo, noesis and noema. You said these are fundamental. Let's break them down. What exactly is the noema? You hinted it's more than just what we're thinking about.
Far more nuanced, yes. It's easy to oversimplify, so let's take them one by one. The noetic side, or noesis, refers to the really inherent moments of the mental process itself. It's the subjective how of experiencing.
And how, the act itself.
Yes, the act as it's lived, unfolding in time within consciousness. It includes things like seizing upon this object, holding it fast, producings pertaining to explicatings, relatings, comprisings, multiple position takings of believings, deemings likely, valuings. So if you're perceiving Van Gogh's Starry Night, the noesis is your act of perceiving, your eyes scanning, your attention focusing, the feeling of awe, the mental process of taking it in. It's the subjective stream of experiencing.
Okay, the subjective side. My act of seeing, feeling, thinking.
Right. Now, the noema is the correlate to that act. It's the objective what of the experience, but understood in a very specific way. It's the perceived as perceived, the remembered as remembered, the judged as judged, the liked as liked.
The object as it appears in that specific act.
Precisely. It's the object precisely as it is intended in that particular conscious act, considered purely as the content or sense of that act. That's why Husserl often uses inverted commas. We're talking about the object purely as the correlate of consciousness after the Epoche. And here's a key, really mind-bending insight. The tree simpliciter, the physical thing belonging to nature, is nothing less than this perceived tree as perceived which, as perceptual sense, inseparably belongs to the perception.
Wait, say that again. The real tree is the perceived tree as perceived.
Oh, In terms of its sense, its meaning for consciousness and the act of perception, yes, he clarifies. The physical tree simpliciter can burn up, be resolved into chemical elements. But the perceived tree, as perceived its specific meaning, how it shows up for you in that moment of seeing belongs inseparably to the essence of that specific perceptual process. It's the objective sense or meaning correlate of the subjective act.
So if I remember the tree later, the noesis changes, remembering not seeing. And the noema also changes. It becomes the tree as remembered.
Exactly. The noema shifts. It might be fuzzy or have different associations, but it's still a coherent object sense, the tree as remembered, which is the correlate of that act of remembering. This shows how the object isn't static. Its meaning for us is constantly being constituted and modulated by our conscious acts. It's always a meant object. And within the noema itself, Husserl makes a further useful distinction. There's a core identity, the pure object, something as a point of unity, which he sometimes calls the object simpliciter, or just X. This is the identical that which we intend through different acts, the same tree, whether perceived or remembered.
The underlying it.
Yes. And then there's the object and the how of its determinations. This is the full noematic sense, the X plus all its specific predicates, its way of appearing, its determined and undetermined aspects, precisely as intended in this particular act. So the X is the tree, the how includes its greenness, its perceived shape from this angle, its potential shade, etc.
Okay, so noesis, the act of experiencing. Noema is the object as experienced, with its core identity, X, and its specific how. This distinction feels really powerful. What problem does it solve, or what does it help us understand better?
It solves a fundamental problem. How can we experience the same object over time through different acts, perceiving, remembering, imagining, and different perspectives, seeing different sides, if each conscious act and each appearance is unique?
Right. How do we get identity out of difference?
The noesis-noema distinction shows how. The noses, the acts change. The specific how within the noema changes, different profiles appear. But consciousness synthesizes these into a unified experience directed towards the identical noematic core, the X. The object's stable identity isn't just passively found. It's an achievement of consciousness, constituted through the interplay of noesis and noema. It avoids skepticism, everything is fleeting flux, and naive realism, we just see things as they are.
It shows identity as constituted meaning. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, our experience isn't neutral, is it? We don't just perceive. We believe, doubt, wish things were different. How does that fit in?
Absolutely crucial point. Experience is saturated with what Husserl calls doxic or belief characteristics. These are our stances towards the noema's reality.
Doxic relating to belief.
Yes, from the Greek doxa. For instance, perceptual belief normally accompanies perception, giving the noema the characteristic of being actual. When you see the tree, you typically believe it's actually there. That belief is part of the total experience. Other examples are certain representation, sure mindfulness. These are being-positing positional acts. They show our cognitive commitment to the object's existence or status.
So belief isn't separate from perception. It's often woven right into it.
Exactly. And these belief characteristics can be modified. The basic unmodalized form is belief certainty, just taking something as actual. But from this, other being modalities arise. Possible, probable, doubtful, questionable. These correspond to ways of positing like possibly existing, probably existing, and so on.
So our certainty can vary.
Right. And negation is also a modification, a cancellation of a positive characteristic, leading to the characteristic non-existing. Affirmation underscores or confirms a position. It's a whole spectrum of how consciousness engages with the reality status of its objects.
This makes me think about imagination again. When we imagine the centaur, we don't usually believe it's actually there. How does that work in terms of these belief characteristics? Can we switch belief off?
Yes, this is where the extremely important neutrality modification comes in. It's a way of being conscious of something, having a noema, but without positing its existence, without endorsing its actuality.
The spinning the belief part.
Precisely. And Husserl states clearly, fantasy itself is in fact a neutrality modification. When we imagine our fantasy, what is fancied is intended to not as actually present past or future. Rather, it only hovers before us as what is without actuality of position. It's like taking a memory, presentiation, and neutralizing its belief component.
So the centaur hovers without being posited as real.
Exactly. The act of fantasying the centaur is a real psychical act, noesis, but the neutrality modification allows us to engage with the centaur noema without making an existential claim about it. The imagining is real, but the centaur itself is intentionally grasped as non-actual, as nothing in terms of existence. And Husserl stresses, the hovering itself, the inventive consciousness, is not itself invented. The capacity to imagine is real, even if its objects aren't.
That's a critical distinction. It validates imagination as a genuine conscious act without confusing it with reality.
Absolutely. It's vital for understanding art, fiction, hypotheses, planning, anytime we engage with the non-actual. And consciousness doesn't stop there. It combines acts. Husserl talks about founded noses and synthetical acts.
Probably like build upon.
Yes. More complex acts are often founded on simpler ones. Intentionalities founded on objectivations include feelings, desires, acts of will, which are often founded on underlying perceptions, memories, or even neutral imaginations. For example, your aesthetic liking for a painting might be founded on your neutralized perception of it. Your joy or sorrow might be founded on a non-neutralized belief about something.
So emotions and desires often have a cognitive base.
They're intentionally directed, founded on some objectivation, and consciousness performs syntheses. It can collect multiple items into a plural consciousness, one and one and one. It can relate things, A is beside B, and these plural acts can be converted into a singular consciousness where the collection or relation is grasped as a single object, the group, the relationship.
Consciousness is constantly structuring and unifying.
Constantly. It's a universal principle to the essence of every intentive mental process. There belongs the having of at least one, but as a rule, many, positing characteristics, positings, interconnected by way of the relationship of founding. There's usually a primary archontic or governing positing that holds the whole complex experience together.
Wow. That is an incredibly detailed breakdown of the structure of experience, the act, the object as meant, the belief status, the layering. It's like a microanatomy of consciousness.
Yeah.
But as we said, the goal isn't just description. It's about grounding reason and understanding actuality. How does all this intricate structure lead back to claims about what's real or true? What is the phenomenology of reason?
Grounding knowledge, reason, and actuality.
Okay, so we've journeyed deep into the mechanics of pure consciousness, the Epoche, intentionality, noesis, noema, belief modalities. But if we've bracketed the real world to do this analysis, how do we use this understanding to make claims about what's actually real or true again? How does Husserl bridge this gap? What is this phenomenology of reason?
This is absolutely the crucial payoff, connecting the deep analysis of consciousness back to knowledge and reality. Husserl argues that rationality and actuality are intrinsically linked, essentially correlates. He states, no matter what one says about such objects, that which is meant and stated must, if one speaks rationally, be something which can be grounded, shown, directly seen, or immediately seen intellectually.
So rationality requires grounding, requires being able to show something.
Yes, and specifically, in the sphere of logic and statement, being truly or actually and being something which can be shown rationally are necessarily correlated. For something to count as actual or true, it must, in principle, be capable of being rationally validated, demonstrated, seen in some sense. And the showing isn't just about what we happen to observe empirically, it's an ideal, an essential possibility, rooted in the very structure of reason and consciousness.
Okay, so truth is tied to the possibility of rational demonstration or seeing. What does he mean by seeing here? And evidence.
Evidence is key. In its broadest sense for Husserl, evidence is the unity of a rational position with that which essentially motivates the position. It's the experience of justification, where our belief or claim finds its fulfilling ground. It's what makes a position rational. He then distinguishes types of evidence or seeing. There's assertoric seeing, which is the direct, certain grasp of an individual fact, like clearly perceiving a landscape and asserting, it is so. It has certainty, but it's about something contingent.
Seeing that something is the case.
Right. Then there's apodictic intellectual seeing. This carries apodicticity, the insight that something must be so, that it excludes being otherwise. This is the kind of evidence we have when grasping essences, like in arithmetic. 2 + 2 = 4 isn't just true, it's necessarily true. You see, it couldn't be otherwise.
The necessity aspect.
Yeah.
And what's the ultimate source of this justification?
The ultimate ground is originary evidence. This is where the intended object is given originarily, presented directly and fully to consciousness, fulfilling the intention completely. This direct intellectual seeing or intuitive grasp is the final court of appeal for rational legitimation.
Okay, originary evidence is the gold standard. Now, you mentioned earlier that even imagination can grasp essences. Does imagination count as evidence in some way? And how does this relate to validating claims about actual things in the world versus just possible essences?
That's a subtle but important point. For validating claims about actuality in the natural world, actual experience is the primary source of actual validation. Our ongoing, coherent perception of the world provides the evidence for its factual existence.
Makes sense. Actual world, actual experience.
But for essences, it's different. Because essences are ideal structures, not dependent on factual existence, the intuitive presentiation of its perfect fulfillment is equivalent to the fulfillment itself. This means that vividly imagining an eidetic truth, like the properties of a perfect triangle, can be functionally equivalent to intellectually seeing it. You can grasp the necessary truth through imagination, and this grasp provides apodictic evidence for the essential relationship, just by altering your attitude from imagining to seeing the essence.
So imagination can be a source of eidetic evidence? Wow. How do we then distinguish a motivated possibility from just wishful thinking, especially regarding the actual world?
Through motivated possibility, our ongoing experience provides the context. Husserl gives an example. Speculating that the unseen underside of this desk might have 10 legs is an empty possibility if you have no reason to think so. But believing it has 4 legs is a motivated possibility if your current perception suggests a normal desk. Experience motivates certain possibilities and excludes others. It's not arbitrary. It's grounded in the unfolding coherence of experience.
So possibility is constrained by evidence. And even immediate evidence, like perception or memory, isn't always perfect, right? It needs checking.
Exactly. Immediate rational positings often need confirmation and verification. A clear memory, for instance, has original immediate legitimacy, but it's relative and imperfect. Memory can err. Its rationality, he says, ultimately springs from the power of perception, but it still needs confirmation, perhaps through concatenations of memories, checking against other experiences, ensuring harmony and consistency over time. Our grasp of actuality is built up through this ongoing process of verification and correction.
It sounds like a dynamic process of reality testing built into consciousness itself. Now this brings us back to constitution. You said each region of objects is constituted in a specific way. Can you elaborate on this problem of phenomenological constitution? How does consciousness actually build up these different kinds of objects? Physical things, other minds, even abstract cultural realities.
Yes, constitution is Husserl's term for how objects of any kind come to have the meaning and status they do for consciousness. Each objective region is constituted in the manner peculiar to consciousness. An actual object isn't just there. It has a priori built-in ways it can be perceived, objectivated, conceived, demonstrated ways it can show up and be validated for us. Take physical thing constitution. We already discussed the one-sidedness and the etc. Husserl says it's an eidetic insight that each perception is capable of being amplified. The process is thus an endless one. No single perception is ever complete.
The infinite horizon.
Right. Yet, despite this endlessness, we still seize upon the idea of physical thing with evidence and adequately. How? Through synthesis. Consciousness takes the flow of partial profiles, the adumbrations experienced over time, and synthesizes them, unifying them into the stable, identical idea or noema of this physical thing. The etc. itself becomes part of the constituted meaning of being a physical thing having infinite possible views. We grasp the unity through the multiplicity.
So the object's identity is an achievement of synthesis across time. What about other people? The intersubjective world.
That involves intersubjective constitution. The intersubjective world is the correlate of intersubjective experience, and it's mediated primarily by empathy. My experience of the world, your experience of the world, are correlated and synthesized through our mutual recognition of each other as conscious subjects. This involves multiple unities of things pertaining to the senses, which are already individually constituted by the many subjects. We build a shared, objective world on the foundation of empathy and communication. It's how we move beyond individual perspective to shared reality and science.
Constitution through empathy and shared experience. And does he extend this even further to things like laws or states?
He absolutely does. This is crucial. He goes beyond physical and psychical realities to novel objectivities of a higher order. He lists things like value objects and practical objects, all concrete cultural formations which determine our actual life as hard realities, such as the state, the law, custom, the church, and so forth.
So social and cultural realities are also constituted.
Yes, they are founded on physical realities, like law books, and psychical realities, like acts of willing or believing the law, but they are founded in novel. They are not reducible to just the sum of their parts. A state, or the law, has its own unique meaning, its own way of being actual for us, which is constituted through complex layers of intersubjective intentions, beliefs, and practices. They have their own structures of constitution.
That's incredibly encompassing. It seems phenomenology aims to explain how everything we experience gets its sense and reality for us.
That's precisely the ambition. Phenomenology ultimately encompasses the whole natural world and all the ideal worlds, like logic or culture, that it initially excluded via the Epoche. It includes them as the world sense, the meaningful totality of reality. How? By uncovering the sets of eidetic laws connecting any object, sense, and noema, whatever, with the closed system of noses. Essentially, understanding the lawful ways consciousness intends and constitutes objects allows us to understand the very meaning of actuality itself. The actual object always points back as an index to the whole system of conscious processes that constitute it as actual. He even hints at a marvelous teleology in all this, a kind of underlying purposefulness or goal-directedness in how consciousness structures and unifies the world, even if it's not strictly demanded by logic. It suggests an inherent drive towards coherence and meaning.
A marvelous teleology. That's a striking phrase. It suggests consciousness isn't just passively structuring things, but maybe actively aiming towards a coherent world. What are the implications of that for how we understand ourselves and knowledge?
It implies that consciousness is fundamentally a meaning-making, world-building activity. The reality we experience isn't just a brute fact giving to us. It's an ongoing, dynamic achievement, a constant process of synthesis and unification driven by consciousness itself, guided by these underlying eidetic laws. It means that understanding reality requires understanding the intricate workings of the consciousness that constitutes it. And for us, as individuals, it suggests a kind of intimate participation in, and maybe even responsibility for, the world we experience. Our pursuit of knowledge isn't just about finding truths out there, but about understanding how things come to be true and actual for consciousness.
Right.
Outro.
Wow. Okay, you have really covered some ground today. We've journeyed through Husserl's incredibly profound ideas, haven't we? Starting with that radical step of setting aside the natural attitude to explore pure essences.
A crucial first step.
Then understanding the method, the phenomenological reduction or Epoche, which opens up this whole realm of pure consciousness.
Gateway, yes.
And from there, delving into the core structure. Intentionality, the dual nature of experience with noesis and noema, how our beliefs, the doxic modalities shape reality for us, and even how fantasy fits in with its neutrality modification.
Unpacking the intricate machinery.
Exactly. And finally, seeing how all this provides a completely new foundation for understanding reason, evidence, actuality, and the very constitution of our world, from a simple physical object to our shared experience with others, all the way up to complex cultural realities like law or the state.
Connecting it all back to truth and reality.
This deep dive, it feels like it wasn't just about abstract philosophy, was it? It really feels like it's about fundamentally rethinking your own experience of the world for everyone listening.
It invites a personal reflection, absolutely.
Yeah, it's about gaining knowledge, not just of facts, but digging deeper into the very structures and processes that make those facts possible, that give them meaning, that make your own experience of reality coherent, and maybe even, as Husserl hints, purposeful. He really invites us to see that the world isn't just out there, separate from us, but is constantly, subtly being constituted in here, right? Within the depths of our own pure consciousness.
That's the radical shift in perspective. So if every object, every reality is indeed constituted in consciousness through these incredibly intricate layers of intentionality, reason, noesis, noema, these fundamental ways consciousness structures meaning, then the question for you listening becomes, how might really understanding these eidetic concatenations of consciousness, these deep structures, change the way you interact with what you believe to be actual in your own life, in the world around you?
Does it change the status of reality?
Well, does it mean that reality, in a very profound sense, isn't a fixed thing, but an ongoing dynamic process of meaning-making, a process that you are always intimately a part of? Maybe consider how your own natural attitude, which is so necessary for just getting through the day, might still be subtly holding you back from deeper insights into knowledge, truth, maybe even yourself.
The ultimate aha moment.
Perhaps the ultimate aha moment isn't just learning the terms, but truly realizing that the world isn't just passively observed out there, it's continuously actively being constituted in here, within your own consciousness. And we really invite you to keep exploring what that profound realization might mean for how you understand absolutely everything.